Welcome people to our Anti-Racist Theory Power Hour. And my name is Aminta, and I work with Be the Change Consulting as a trainer and a coach sometimes and a consultant sometimes. And most of my time these days is spent in training on becoming an anti-racist organization and all the little pieces within that. And then I also spend some of my time internally facing in our organization. I have a beautiful title, the Director of Climate, Culture, and Effectiveness, which refers to the organizational climate, although I also attend to the global climate. And that means that I also spend a lot of time internally saying, if that's how we teach folks about becoming an anti-racist organization or supervisor or leader out there. What are we doing internally to make sure that we're walking that walk in here? And so that's mostly what's important to know about my role. In terms of my identities, it would be good for you to know that I am a Black identified and mixed race woman. You know, I'm light skinned and freckled with frizzy hair, and there's a lot of privilege that comes with the light-skinned part of that, and so I'm really conscious and aware of that on an everyday basis. I am also a parent, and I also live in a tiny little studio in a pod with about 8 other folks, and that's important to know because it sometimes impacts distractions or things that might show up on my Zoom screen here. And I'll hand it to you, Sangeeta.
Thanks, Aminta. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all and be here with you all in the Zoomiverse. My name is Sangeeta Kumar, and I'm the founder of Be the Change Consulting. And some of the identities that I hold as a trainer and a consultant in the work that I'm doing is I'm almost always aware of that I'm a dark-skinned woman, that I married about a decade ago, oh my God, a long time ago, a Muslim man, and converted to being Muslim, and have had the experience in the past couple of years of just like noticing like what happens if you're Muslim in this country. Doesn't always feel safe or good. And I'm also an organizational leader, which means often in a space I bring positional power. So definitely inside of my own organization that is felt. And as a consultant or a facilitator, people often hand me influence and power to hold space. And so there's like a way that I get used to kind of like getting to control the pace of things, or the what do we talk a lot about and what do we talk not so much about. And so that is there's like I'm aware of a combination of parts of my identity that have given me a lot of stress and anxiety, and other parts of my identity that give me a lot of privilege. How about you, Lauren?
Thank you, Sangeeta. Hey everyone, my name is Lauren. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I wear many hats, but one of the hats I wear is I'm a program manager for the Becoming an Anti-Racist Organization series. I'm a trainer in some of those workshops, and the identities that are front and center for me every day is my Black identity, my trans and non-binary and queer identities, and those are kind of liminal in the sense of it's like a breath, an inhale and an exhale. There's some agency there, and then there's definitely the awareness of how I can be pushed to the side and disrupted constantly by the white supremacy culture that we are swimming in. So I try to uphold those titles and identities and find my power and find my voice. And then I understand that at times, even though I'm holding that staff of power, my voice is still silent. So thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. So we'd love to, this space is we called it a power hour, and we set this up because we run a series of trainings called Becoming an Anti-Racist Organization that we see some of you at. And that series has kind of a skill building track where we look at bringing anti-racist techniques and practices into our roles in different functional areas, like as a facilitator or as a supervisor or in HR. And then we also have a cohort that is designed for organizational leaders who want to look at sort of the roots of racist sentiment, structured racism that is embedded into most of our organizations. And through those trainings, we realized like people have a lot of questions about about things that like maybe comes up in a training, but it needs like more conversation, or, you know, as we come back to our own organizational spaces and we try to put things into practice, we feel this too. What sounds right in theory, or what sounds simple on paper, in actuality, as we like look at the complexity, things can get confusing or multi-layered. And so this is a space for people to ask questions about either things that you're thinking about or things that you're practicing or interested in doing. And then we get to talk together. So Aminta, Lauren, and I are part of an organization that consults and trains, but we're also actively trying to put these things into our own organizational DNA, into our waters, into how we hold relationships together. And so a lot of what we'll say is kind of like our anecdotal experiences or our stories, and then we'll make space for you all too, because we're definitely not holding ourselves as experts, but as people in practice. So that's how I would frame today. Would you add to that, Aminta or Lauren?
No, I mean, the only thing I'd say is a note about time, which is, yeah, we gave ourselves an hour. We're already down to 49 minutes left, which is, you know, I just wanted to say there's all the conversations that we have about this, all the work that we're doing. One of the things I'm noticing for myself is everything takes more time than I think it's going to. When it comes to DEI, everything takes more time than I think it's going to. When it comes to becoming anti-racist, everything takes more time. And so today will be a start of some conversations, a luxurious, abundant 45 minutes that we'll have here together. And then to know that you'll go off and finish those conversations, or you'll come back to us and continue those conversations, and that it doesn't have to feel resolved or closed by the end of today's hour. And I would love to hear what the questions are.
Yeah, so feel free to, you can come off mute and ask a question out loud, or drop into the chat if people came with questions. And this is a good moment to not be shy. Come on, Myra.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, first, thanks for the opportunity to be in this space with you all. Very much appreciate it. I am new to the Be the Change training series that my organization has been undergoing. I was on maternity leave or parental leave, but my team has been doing it, and it's been amazing. And I've heard such wonderful feedback. Alexis is one of our great team members, so I'm excited to see her here. I didn't know she was going to be here with me. So I have some questions. I have a question. I fully recognize that white supremacist values or white supremacist actions, I tend to have those a lot as a leader, right? Particularly urgency, perfectionism, even like timing, okay? And I'm working on that. And I really believe I've made some progress based on feedback that I got from my team members that, you know, they see me showing up. I appreciate that. But I do still have like high expectations and want the best quality product and want people to come to a meeting on time. And I want to be mindful and respectful of when is it white dominant culture versus when is it what you're supposed to do as an organization, right? Like, how can you ensure we are instilling the flexibility that we need to support our team members while also holding ourselves accountable to timelines that we need in order to complete our work and not feel like everyone's running like a chicken with their head cut off. And I'm saying this like honestly, like I want to do right by my team members, but I also want to recognize that when we're all stressed out about because, you know, we're late on this or we gave someone more flexibility on this timeline, it then impacts everyone else as well, right? The next reviewer, the next, person in line. And I want to be mindful of, when is it white dominant culture versus when is it a performance? I don't want to even say a performance issue. Like, just how can we build a culture where accountability is based on trust and relationships? I hope I'm making sense.
Such a good question. You're totally making sense. I think it makes sense. Does it make sense to you, Minta?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And look at all the people giving you snaps and love. We like when people use their reactions and put things into the chat, so it doesn't feel like anyone's talking by themselves or left out all on their own. Because even asking a question like that is an anti-racist pivot, right? To admit I'm working on something. I am, and I know that I have internalized dominant culture practices and characteristics, and I'm confused about them. That is like an admission and vulnerability and a ask for feedback that is that requires love. So thank you, Sarah, for what you brought. You want to answer, Minta, first?
No, I wanted to say something about the framing of the question, and then I want you to answer, because I know this is a super rich one, juicy one for you.
Rude, whatever. And it's true, it is.
It is. Okay, so what I wanted to say is the way that you framed the question, the care that you took with framing that question, in which what I heard is that you made sure not to frame the question as pitting rigor, achievement, and excellence against equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-racism. That I heard you take care to not let the questions imply that you thought, in order for us to be anti-racist, we have to let go of excellence or rigor or high standards. And I just wanted to name for you that already is, it's already a huge anti-racist pivot just in the way that you frame the question. Because so often what people say is it's either one or the other. I'm either going to be rigorous and have high standards and achieve excellence and meet our bottom line, or I'll be inclusive and anti-racist. And how do I do both? And what I heard you say is, no, it's more complex and nuanced than that. But they are definitely working with each other and in tension. And what do you do with the tension? So, and I'd love to hear Sangeeta say, what do we do with the tension, Sangeeta?
That's great. Okay, so I don't know what we do with the tension, but here's some ideas. And then we'll hear from other folks too. One thing I think is to connect, like when we get rigid about things like rules of what time people should be present, right? So let's just take time as an example, starting on time. The idea, like we have to start on time, and if you don't start on time, that we've broken a rule, right? That is something that is in my head. I learned that it is unprofessional, it's inappropriate, it's rude, but mostly I'm breaking a rule. So the way that I have been taught to follow a social mores, like coming on time, is that if you don't come on time, you're breaking a rule, and if you break a rule, you will be punished. So that to me is the white supremacy thinking, right? That embeds a behavior in a rule with a fear of punishment and connects it to your how much belonging you will have. If you don't follow these rules, then we will kick you out, we will reject you, you will be, it's a way to be banished, right? So that is the opposite of belonging. The way that I would reframe it, right, is to say, when we ask people to show up, we are looking to lean into the value of collaborative practice, of collaboration, of showing up for one another, of knowing that we mean something to each other, to know that I can depend on you. And for me to be able to ask you to do something and trust that you will do it is a social contract that we reinforce through our behaviors. And so when someone doesn't come on time, it's not about the rule, it's that we missed the opportunity to start slow together. We missed the opportunity to connect before we got to move into content. And when we don't get to all move together in the right process, someone's needs are not going to get met, and it makes it harder for us to work together. So to me, like we get to say being on time is important, but why it's important is not because if you don't do this, you will, blah, blah, blah. It's more like, what do we miss when we don't start together and we don't end together? That's one way that I try to complexify it. How's that sound? What do you think, Myra?
You know, I think it really links to, I think what Aminta said at the very beginning that had nothing to do with my question, but it does, is we just need more time, right? To actually build that understanding of us meaning something to each other, right? Like, sorry, ¿está bien? ¿Todo bien? Sí, está bien, no te preocupes, no te preocupes. Sorry, childcare. My mom is here with me. That we need to first, like, it's, I can't just automatically have an employee come and you have to be here at 9 a.m., but that there needs to be an understanding of the values as to why it means, what it means to be here at 9 a.m. to us, right? That we're showing up for each other, that I'm counting on you, you're counting on me. And that's just time, like any relationship, right? It's time and trust. I think that's what I'm getting from you. I do still feel like, I don't know, I just feel bad sometimes, guys. And because I don't want to be a bad leader. I want my team, I fully acknowledge that I'm a person that likes to be liked. So when you're putting rules in place or deadlines are missed and you want to be flexible, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I'm sorry.
No, it makes sense. And the desire to be flexible or the desire to be liked is a normal and human thing. And to me, we will always, in leadership, we will always have people who we set up a social contract, no matter how much time you take, and it's not going to happen the way we thought it would, right? So there will always be opportunities to give people feedback, to say, oh, you didn't actually show up the way we needed you to show up. Like, it's okay to give feedback. It's what is the come from that it's coming from? And is there a threat of show up or you will be kicked out? Is the way that we lose our tether to the qualities of belonging. And that the idea that one person's values of what is most important can trump other people's needs. That even when someone shows up late, that we get to go, what happened? I'm worried. What's going on with you?
Yeah.
It's very different from, why'd you do that?
Yeah.
So it's about the conversation and how we have it, which we keep doing over time.
Yes. Oh, Mel has her hand up, and then also Emily put something in the chat that's really relevant to what you said.
Okay, and then I think Sydney has her hand too.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a stack. Come on, Mel.
Okay. I just wanted to say, like, I think about this a lot, right? Like, especially with time and holding folks to a time and all these things, but then, or schedule, but I do think that it's really just like the humanity piece of it and just like really being able to see folks, right? And so I think, like, yeah, time is really important, but I always think, why is it important? Not just because I say it is, you know what I mean? And like, what are we working towards?
Yeah.
So like, and I do care, like, I want to know what's going on with folks, and I trust and I love folks that I'm with. So I want to check in if they're not on time, and I want to say, like, what's going on, right? And try to figure that out. Cause I understand that it takes all of us to get anything done also. So like we all have to be together.
Yeah.
Anyways, I just check.
Oh, thank you for
All
that.
right, Mel, Young Women's Freedom Center in the house. Thanks,
Come on,
Mel.
Sydney.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to say thank you for sharing. I kind of interpreted what you said a bit differently, wondering, and I could be wrong, but as if maybe there's a different underlying circumstance. But I do have one question first. Are you like the first or one of like the top female leaders in your like area? Because I think about this in a sense of like, is there just like a how do I want to frame this? Like, are people putting you into a box of the like boss bitch leader? It's like someone who is strong, who has an opinion, who has expectations, and is very intelligent, but they're intimidated in a way, if that makes sense. I hope that I phrase that in a way that is appropriate, but like
Thank you.
someone who is like strong, but like they're like everyone else is, in a sense, not saying that you are, but like they're getting this vibe when, you know, that may not be your intention.
Sydney, I thought that was so funny the way you paused and said, how should I frame this? And then what you came back with, I was like, whoa, okay. I wonder what the other framing was.
Well, like, it's kind of like, like I admire people that are like that, because we tend to have this idea about strong women in the workplace. And like people make them feel as though like they don't have a right to have a strong opinion and be what a white male or man values or leads, in a sense, if that makes sense.
That totally makes so much sense. There's all sorts of things going on there. There can be stereotypes about women and women in leadership that make it so that the standards are strangely different, where something that a man could say and get away with, or at least be excused for, a woman does and says the same thing, and people are like, oh, whoa, yeah, overpowering, what's going on here? And so that internal sense of that can then, if I carry that internalized sense of that stereotype, that can impact how sensitive I am to how I'm saying something and how I'm putting it. And it is also, there's also something in what you're saying and what both of you were saying, though, that is true, which is that yes, there's the stereotype, but putting the stereotype aside, even for just a moment, that it's also true that if I have more positional power, no matter what my other identities are, if I have more positional power, it is true. It's more likely that when I say to someone, even very gently, so I noticed you were late again today. How are things going? What's going on with you? I'm concerned. Even when I heard Sangeeta just say, I'm worried about you something. And I was like, oh, I don't want someone that has power over me saying they're worried about me, because worried about me might translate into they're like putting a concerned check mark on my performance evaluation, somewhere in their brain. So yes, I have to be mindful that if having more positional power in the situation, everything I talk about this person's timeliness or tardiness or not, is going to potentially land differently than if I were a colleague or peer or someone that had less positional power than they are. So I, as a leader, have the responsibility to be mindful of that. On the other hand, we have to be able to talk about these things and attend to them. We do have to be able to say, we said we were starting at 9 and we didn't because you weren't here at 9. So maybe we need to, what's going on with you? Asking clarifying questions, bringing the humanity in, as Mel said, and bringing the humanity and asking questions about what's going on with you and how are you. That is a way of dismantling the white supremacy tendencies towards perfectionism, which says everyone just has to get here on time no matter what, and either or thinking that says we're either start on time or nothing. It's either on time or nothing. It's either fixed or it's broken. It's perfect or it's broken. So all those things being true, but we do need to talk about it. And this is the part that is where it takes so much time, because we front load it by saying, so the meeting traditionally has started at 9. This is a different configuration of folks. Does 9 still work for everyone? Oh my God, not everyone wants to ask that question, but that could be a way to start. But let's say we already decided the meeting starts at 9. There's 9 of us there. The new person is not going to determine when the meeting starts. So we're just starting at 9. But then I get to say, I noticed you weren't here at 9. What's going on with you? And bring in the humanity. And then I get to follow it up with, and then now day 2, I noticed you again weren't here at 9. And so do we need to reset some agreements about when we start? Or I have a chance to reframe again better land the shared sense of values around why it is we're starting at 9, and also better land the objectives for what it is that we're here to do at all. You know, that what Sangeeta was saying about, we'd start at 9 so that we have time to go slow to move fast. We start at 9 so that we can have connection before content. We start at 9 because we do have several things to cover, and this is one of our only touch points. We start at 9 because relationships are important, so time together all in the room means something. We start at 9 because we honor the collective, collaborative, all those reasons. But it does take time. It means I never get to do the shorthand, we just start at 9 and I need you to be here, or even the other emotional shorthand, which is, you know, I'm really disappointed that you weren't here at 9 when we started. You know, which sounds like it's humanity, but it's not, especially coming from me.
Woo. All right, so we unpacked that and then unpacked it some more. Let's go to another question or another thought. Who else wants to bring something in? Thanks, Myra. You brought us a gift. And thanks, Sydney, for adding, and Mel. Come on, don't be shy.
I'll jump in.
Come on, Emily.
Hi, everyone. I am wondering if folks have suggestions. I've noticed that it's much easier for me to speak to white dominant, white supremacist culture when I'm in a collective, particularly with my colleagues. And I found that when I'm with my direct supervisor and those that are even, I realize it's more like my direct supervisor, or those that are like in kind of the E-suite, if you will, it's harder to call them out in a way, or call them in a way that I feel really is authentic and is a reflection of my integrity. And I'm wondering if folks have had ways of having that interpersonal muscle increase.
All right, that's you, Aminta.
Okay, so I think that what you're saying is when you're in a conversation with folks that have more positional power than you do.
And really, like when it's like they're more positional power, but it's really, I think it's the one-on-one dynamic that is
okay,
being more of a challenge.
Okay, so the one-on-one dynamic. So just regardless of positional power, the one-on-one dynamic. Well, there's a couple of things, and actually the answer that jumped to my mind right away actually addresses both things in a way. One is that in getting away from the white supremacy characteristic of individualism that says somehow work is this place where we're supposed to do everything by ourselves, and moving towards a kind of more and more just asking, what's a way to dismantle any notion or assumption or tendency to think you have to do this by yourself? And so pairing people with each other, doing it in a small group, finding an accountability partner, co-working, assigning co-leaders to any particular project, partner, all those ways. So activating that, that it does mean that we apply this even in scenarios where what needs to happen next is speaking of truth, either to power, speaking of truth to someone that has more positional power than myself, or speaking of truth sideways to a colleague, speaking of truth really to anyone, speaking truth to a person who has less positional power than I do, because in that situation I'm not speaking truth to power, but truth is coming from power, and whoa, that's scary for them too, right? So in any one of those situations, making it so that in our organizational culture and structures, you never have to do it by yourself. You do not have to have the conversation alone. So just knowing that has changed things radically for me. Knowing that when I'm talking to someone that has more power than me, when I have feedback to give Sangeeta, that Sangeeta says and repeats over and over again, you can bring someone with you. You could talk it through with someone and type it out and then think it through and bring them with you, or you could just bring them, invite them as a companion and a colleague, as a witness, you know, that you can, or you could write the document and sign it from 2 of you or 3 of you or 5 of you if you want, you know, that she doesn't take it as, she's saying, being in, having a more positional power over you, Aminta, I'm saying, I won't take it as being ganged up on. I won't take it as some sort of unfair, you know, back end, you know, grouping together and scapegoating. She'll do the work to make sure that defensiveness doesn't come up. And I get to unburden myself with the feeling of like, I have to be there alone in a room, quaking in my boots to talk to her. She has power over me. But this is also true with my colleagues, that I can say in any instance, I'm scared to do this. I'm scared to say it because I've never said it to someone before. Or I'm scared to say it because I tend to get lost when I say it. And if they come back with a lot of hurt feelings, I might back away from my truth so much that I dissemble it even in the meeting. Or I need someone else there present because I'm scared, because in the past when I've told someone my truth and then they responded back with defensiveness or anger, I get so angry and defensive that then I do harm in the meeting where I was trying to undo harm that and I want someone there to be actually like not just a witness, but someone that's going to be like an accountability partner for me. And when I'm speaking to someone that has less positional power than I am, inviting them and saying, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. And sometimes I have to do this awkward thing where I'm like, that actually maybe it would be good if we brought some other folks into this conversation. And sometimes it's because what I'm going to say actually does apply to more than just that person. And so I'm sort of collectivizing it, but also doing myself a service of saying, actually, this is a culture issue, not just an individual performance issue or, working style issue. And other times I've said, this is going to be a little bit more formal. Like I actually am having a problem with something actually related to your performance. And I want to invite you to bring someone with you because these conversations can be hard. And is there anyone that would increase the likelihood that you'll be able to hear what I'm saying? And amazingly, I've had people say, yes, there is. And then they bring someone with them that feels like an ally. So just some examples of a way of addressing that.
How's that, Emily? You got something you can try?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Give it to him. Aminta kind of landed that in like the practice of individualism. There's also the dominant culture characteristic of fear of open conflict, which means that it's hard for all of us. We all get scared in giving feedback. I get scared giving feedback to people who I supervise. I get worried when my clients give me feedback. I get worried when I have to give. So unless we practice it and we build those muscles, it's going to make us shit scared. And so there's like the role of courage and then practice, right? And if we can keep practicing, so this week, everyone give somebody feedback. Give someone who's at the same level as you feedback, and someone who's above you feedback, and someone who's somewhere below you feedback. Because don't wait until it's like a big heated thing. Start practicing it with little things so that it's in our muscles to both give and receive. All right, let's move to another one. Who else has a question? Thanks, Emily. Juicy. What else is popping up for folks?
I think that maybe it's like I'm trying to have a process that's like transferable for another person, but not trying to set the standards that if somebody else comes into my role, that they're unable to accommodate. Because like one thing I do try and practice is to ask everybody how they want to get feedback and give feedback, but I try and think about like the individual people who are inside of the space. And sometimes, because some people are like, I do not like it when people try and say something to me in front of a whole room of folks, like please me more directly or to the side. And some folks are like, I need to see it in writing, like, or I need to see, so, like folks are like, maybe everybody's like, oh, it just depends how I'm feeling. It's a more based off of an emotion. Like if I'm under a lot of stress or I got a lot of pressure, so it's something that I'm always, but now that I have like a different position too, where I'm even more people, I'm like, oh, it's kind of when you have now when you're with many people, and to take the time and the intentionality to like get to know somebody. Yeah, anyways, that's something that I think about a lot, is and how to get the room to focus on themselves too. Cause it's like, dang, this person is always late. And it's like, well, like we don't know if that person talked to with their supervisor or something, or, like we don't know what's going on, but like we can express it, like rooted in love, like, hey, like when you don't show up, like we're falling off in this area or something like that. Do we have to like shift like the responsibility of this? Can you still do it? But then also knowing that there are some like maybe private conversations, because I feel like all of us have like our times of years where we got more capacity than other times, so whatever may be happening. So yeah, I was just thinking about that. I guess the question more so is that, am I doing too much?
I love it. I love it. Sangeeta, you want to take some of that? I mean, so Sangeeta, you put in the chat, thinking about individuals and giving feedback in a way they can best receive it. And then what I heard was, I need that process to be replicable so that it's not only me that can do this. So it can't be such a complicated, ornate process that I'm the only one that can even know what the process is and actually make it work. And also it can't be so big that it doesn't work as we grow and as more people are involved. And am I doing too much? Sangeeta, what do you think?
I don't think you're doing too much. But I think it's a lot to do, right? So there's that. And I think that the thing about feedback is, I love this idea that you have the bandwidth and the capacity to ask people how they like to get feedback, and then do your best to give feedback in those ways. And structurally in an organization, one thing we can do is look for more places where we're asking people to give and ask for feedback. So we've just started to do, at the end of a training like this, we stay on for 15 minutes. So Aminta, Lauren, and I will stay on, and we'll just give each other feedback. What's something you did that was bomb, and what's something that you can keep working on to make yourself even more bomb for next time, right? And then in our, when we do our check-ins, we shifted the term supervision because we're understanding it to be more and more of like it comes from this idea of like extractive overseer, I'm going to manage and micromanage, so we've shifted from supervision to growth and development sessions. And in those sessions, we ask everyone to ask, who's somebody you asked for feedback this week, and who did you get feedback from? And so our own ability to share with other people, oh, Aminta gave me this feedback that I talked a little too long on this question, or she answered a question and then I felt the need to answer a question on top of her. So if I can talk about it, then we're practicing softening some of that defensive-ness, right? And there's like, if we think about like why people say like, I don't want feedback in front of people, it's because we're embarrassed. We don't want to be corrected. But the truth is that we all need feedback to be in better collaboration with one another. And so what we should be like is, oh, you didn't get any feedback this week? I guess you're walking around super defended. What can you do to make people feel more comfortable giving you feedback? Right. So what we've done is we've created that as if I am given feedback, that's embarrassing. And we could just flip it. Like, oh, we want to be getting feedback a couple times a week. And we want to notice that sometimes the feedback is coming in sideways. People aren't always giving us feedback by saying, especially those of us in positional power, the feedback is not coming with, hey, Sangeeta, when you did this, it made me feel blah, blah, blah. The feedback comes with people being silent, or people getting super still or stiff on Zoom, right? I can tell like, oh, I triggered someone. Something I said didn't land good, and they're taking care of themselves. So how do we get like more nuanced in what we can track as feedback? So structure it, ask it, model asking and sharing when people have given you feedback in a neutral way, and then look for feedback that might not be verbal. Those are some things I could think of.
And then I did want to add something about replicable by other folks, which is a challenge area for me, which is to do what I can to make it transmittable to other people, so that Sangeeta's talking about spreading it out from the start so that everyone's practicing it and getting used to hearing it going on much more. So you're not the only one holding the sort of giving the feedback. But then there's also documenting it in some way. And it doesn't, there is a lot in our organization for sure, worship of the written word. Like if it's not in a Google Doc, it doesn't exist, which I really resist. And on the other hand, it is true, a Google Doc is a way to pass something along to somebody else. I can point to it and say, we actually wrote down these structures of how we give and receive feedback, including some examples of ways to ask for feedback, ways to receive feedback, some things to keep in mind when giving it, some things to keep in mind when receiving it. And I have had to dismantle the notion that I alone have to be able to put it in the Google Doc. And I pair myself with someone that's really good at the Google Doc. And I just talk out loud because I can be brilliant when I'm speaking, and then not be able to get it on paper. And so I speak, they type, and sometimes even I speak, they type, and then somebody else puts it into a cool format with purple and orange, and it looks really good. And now we actually have something that can be handed to the next person that I'm helping to train into being able to be the one holding my position and my role in that meeting, in that program, in that whatever it is. And then I also am like excited about the idea that in some places it wouldn't even be in a document. Maybe in some organizations it would just be a video or a written story or a song. It doesn't have to be written in a Google Doc, but for now, Google Doc does work. Okay.
Is any of that helpful, Julia?
But I didn't hear the last thing you said. What is
Was any of that helpful?
Oh yeah. I just it made me
Great.
think of like even more things. So I'm like, yes, yeah.
Well, Julia,
I just want that gesture.
Julia, schedule an appointment with me, and then
Yes, absolutely.
we have hours together. Great.
Okay, great.
Okay, we have time for like one more maybe. Anyone else have something you want to share or ask? This is definitely the longest time I stayed silent.
I know I had to mute myself. It was so challenging.
We just, one of the things that we've been looking at is like, can we hold space for silence and give people time to think? And one tactic that I learned a long time ago as a facilitator is like, you count to 17. So you ask a question, and if it's quiet, you start counting. You count to 17. And I'm a chatterbox, so 17 is a long time for me, and is like very hard for me to stay still. And but the idea is that some people actually need the quiet to think. And then here's the thing that I do that's bad practice is I start counting to 17 and I'm like, I'm on 5, I'm on 6. Is anyone gonna talk? I'm on 8.
Yeah.
Which is not staying silent.
And Lauren keeps pointing out to us that talking about waiting till 17 is not the same as waiting till 17. We just did it again.
You did. That is not the way to do it.
Well, I waited for till 17. All right, well.
You did. But then you start talking.
No. That is that's me pretending to take it.
Okay, Nancy put a question in the chat. Do you want me to read it, Nancy? Okay. How do I help change the culture in my organization that does not want to be changed or is slow moving towards equity, inclusion, and diversity, especially if I don't have much power? Sangeeta.
I'm counting to 17.
No. It's such a good question. Oh, such a good question.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there are tactics that are possible when you have buy-in from the top, and then there's a different thing that becomes possible when the thrust for change is coming not from the top, right? It's coming from the middle or the bottom. And even when the motivation for change seems to be coming from the top, there's still a ton of work that people not on the top have to do. So the truth is that anti-racism work is a whole system initiative. We have to activate ourselves in different ways at different levels of the organization. And it is definitely harder if you don't have openness or willingness at the top, or allyship at the top. So some things that I think we can do is really look for allyship. Mm-hmm. So find the people both at your level and, maybe in concentric circles above, higher and higher, to collaborate together on something. So what I think some organizations are willing to do is to create DEI committees or a DEI initiative or a DEI project, right? So different from saying we're going to do an organization-wide turning of the boat towards more of an anti-racist, towards more equitable outcomes. Sometimes an organization was willing to piece out the process into and maybe make a small project. And I think a small project is better than no project. So finding a thing of like, for us in this organization, one DEI outcome could be that we really want to look at supervision, because we think that people who are supervising are not advocating and promoting their people fast enough. And so we just look at the practice of supervision and hold ourselves to the outcome that people of color grow in their positions. So that could be one project, right? So connecting it to something that is concrete and tactical might help to make it less scary. What I think happens a lot for folks is the Pandora's box of equity work can be like so big and so broad. And it happened to us. Like, we started talking about anti-racism, and what every person in my team, in our organization, thought would happen was a different story. And so it didn't matter if we wanted to do it or not. We didn't have the capacity or the bandwidth to even know what everybody was expecting, and let alone to operationalize it. So I think find your allies, develop a project or a proposal, and think about how to shift systems or structures in a project area, because equity work is often, you have to touch one thing, and then once one thing touches, something else will shift, and then something else will shift, and then something else will shift. So like looking for the gears of change might help to create a strategy for an inroad.
Another thing is that, getting better. If I know this is something that I'm interested in or committed to, or I need. So sometimes I'm like, I need this, or I'm going to have to leave here. I can't actually work like this. Or I'm interested in it because it's so important to me in my personal life, my values, and what I want in my workplace culture, because I've heard a stated interest in DEI work in our organization. And so I want to like move towards that. Or sometimes it's actually, I've been charged with that. It's my new role. I hold that in my title, or I'm the head of a committee that was formed. And yet when I come forward with suggestions from the committee or from my new position as DEI person, I get oh my God, that sounds like too much. Or as Nell's put in the chat, that sounds hard. That some of what I can do is I can recognize, by educating myself about this work, and recognize that when we're talking about race and racism, that we are talking about trauma. When we're talking about becoming anti-racist, we're talking about a journey from horrid, dominance and subjugation, hopefully into something that more closely resembles equity and inclusion. And that means we have to talk about trauma, right? And so that's just one avenue of education and skill building I had to do for myself. And one of the things I've learned from that is when I'm bringing forward a suggestion around becoming more anti-racist, that it really matters how I frame it. And so I might start with, well, here's an idea, one of the projects that Sangeeta named, like, here's that idea. And maybe it came from like a big structural change idea, but I've now whittled it down to a small doable project that has limited parameters. The budget is small enough, even the impacts are small enough, the timeline is short enough that leadership might not be so inclined to say, whoa, that sounds too big. So I've already done that, but yet I bring it to them and still they respond back with like, oh, that sounds like a lot, or that sounds like too much. That's okay. What I know now is, oh yeah, so one thing I can do is I can go in and acknowledge Yeah, this is this project I think makes sense. And I know it sounds like a lot to front load for them. It's totally normal to respond to all of this work as if it's a lot, you know. We're all scared. We're really scared. We're scared to open ourselves up to liability. We're scared. Whatever the fears are that you intuit or know are present for that leadership structure or those leadership individuals, you can name some of those, intuitively guess in how you talk about the project itself even. And then also that you're building into people that they need to have opportunities to voice their resistance, their initial defensiveness against the new change being suggested or proposed, or the new process or project. You build into how you bring it to folks that there's totally space for resistance. There's space for them to even try to scrunch it down right in the beginning, and that you yourself are not going to then say, well, then forget it. You're right. It does sound too hard, or but that you're going to say, yeah, there's initial resistance because we all have trauma around this. And so they might be defensive, but I know parts of this or this itself could be doable. So I'm going to name that resistance, create space for it, support that contraction. And then I'm going to actually move forward still. And I might move forward and say, I'm going to reduce the public potential impact of this, like maybe make the group of folks that I'm giving the proposal to smaller, which is another way of, even if I didn't find the allyship that Sangeeta was referring to early on, I can backtrack and find an ally. So I proposed something, they were like, no, it's too much. And now I back off it a little bit. I say, oh, you're right. It sounds hard. I understand you're defensive. I backtrack and then go around and say, now, who can I find on here? Who was nodding in the meeting? Who didn't come up with the defensive resistance, you know, and bring it into them and say, I'm going to approach you in this smaller room when not everybody's listening and the people that were most defensive and scared aren't here, and say, what do you think about it? And then is there a way we could reframe and repropose this? Maybe you need to, could you bring it? Would that be different? If it came from you first, if we brought it together in a collaborative partnership, you know, there's ways to not, I guess for myself, it's also avoiding the either or thinking of abandoning it because I'm afraid of the feeling of tension and conflict that came up when I first proposed it.
Mm-hmm. Aminta named a bunch of moves in what she was describing there: support the contraction, invite resistance. If all those sound like some ninja moves you want to learn more about, we are going to hold a skill building, we're calling it a skill building clinic for folks who want support in the maybe the technique and strategy of holding space for conversations on equity and racial justice and structural racism specifically.
And we're really excited.
Yeah, it's a so much of those moves, like what she described, you know, if we are bringing a proposal to someone and we're worried about what they're going to say, if we can say, I'm just going to start by inviting you to share what are you worried about when you see this proposal? It allows us to control the opening of resistance versus like, I'm worried about what they're going to say. And those are things that like we can practice, because when we're nervous or we're scared, our bodies don't want to open us up. We actually want to armor. And so that when she's connecting, like what's happening, what does our trauma or our sense of like what might make me unsafe here, motivate my body to do, it takes training and practice to do something different. And so that's what we're going to unpack. So Lauren dropped into the chat a link to that training series if you're interested. And we're kind of at the end of time. So we'll close maybe there with that invitation if people want to keep practicing. We'd love to hear if any of this resonated, drop it in the chat. And we would also love for you to come off mute and say goodbye as you leave, so we're not just sitting here talking to ourselves.
Look, Zahir is signing on from Australia.
Ooh, nice.
Love it. Thank you so much, people.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.